let me turn to our speaker today, Dr. Rebecca Slack, who's very kindly agreed to give a talk on Introduction to Wildlife Recording and what it reveals about Ullswater. Rebecca is a plant ecologist. She manages Cumbria's Biodiversity Data Centre, CBDC, based in Carlisle. Let me try and give you a précis of her job description. Her role is multifold: to develop new partnerships and projects, to identify new opportunities, to use biodiversity data, to promote wildlife recording, and to raise awareness of the importance of high-quality environmental data. She works with a small team of skilled ecologists and GIS experts, and her aim is to try to get everyone in Cumbria recording wildlife and to make the CBDC an effective resource for managing it for the benefit of all. It's a big task and an increasingly important one, as we witness in Ullswater and more broadly in Cumbria as a whole, and indeed in UK as a whole, significant reductions in biodiversity caused by a variety of factors. I'm sure she'll use the next hour to guide us through the challenges she and her colleagues in the CBDC face and how you can help. I should perhaps add that we in FOUW have been involved with CBDC for some time, mainly in supporting our habitat programme. And although this has largely been limited up to the current time to work of volunteers in Matterdale, and we have the person who runs that programme here in the hall with us today, Paddy. We're hoping actually that to expand these operations if we can generate enough community interest in other parts around Matterdale. Without more ado, I will pass the floor to Rebecca for her presentation tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. Wow, that is quite an introduction. I hope I can live up to that. It's so I've put together a little agenda for what I'll be covering today. So I thought, just in case people haven't heard of Cumbria Biodiversity Data Centre, I'll do a little intro, then I'll go into a little more detail about wildlife recording and why we want to get more people recording across Cumbria and further afield, and how to do a good record as well, which I think is important to start with good practice and build on it, and some of the tools that are available to help with wildlife recording. I will be focusing on species recording rather than habitat recording, which I know is what has been happening in Matterdale. So it's kind of just going back a little bit. But I'm happy to answer questions about habitat recording as well. And then I will focus probably on the bit that everybody will be interested in, is kind of what do our records say about Ullswater, the valley and the environment around it. So we'll have a look at that at the end, and then a little bit about how to get more involved with some questions as well. So Cumbria Biodiversity Data Centre is a relatively small organisation. We're celebrating a big year as well this year. It'll be our 15th anniversary. So we were formed in 2011, but we have ties and links to what, according to Wikipedia, and Wikipedia is always right, is the oldest recording centre in the UK. So Tully Museum created the Natural History Records Bureau back in 1902. So we can claim that we've kind of evolved out of that to form CBDC in 2011. So that's our claim to fame. Kind of, we're linked to the oldest record centre in the UK. So our data comes from a variety of sources. It comes from individuals, it comes from groups, organisations like National Trust, RSPB. It can come from absolutely anybody and anywhere. We gather it together and process it. We're not the only data centre in existence. There are lots around the UK and further afield. We're part of something called ALERC, the Association of Local Environmental Record Centres, which brings us all together and shares expertise, because we're all very, very different. We're based in a museum. We're based at Tully in Carlisle, as Tim said. But some are based in local authorities, some are based in wildlife trusts, some are independent charities in their own right. So a complete difference of format, but they all do the same thing, and that's collect species, habitat and site information and make that available locally. We have a really stringent recording pathway that we follow to make sure that all the data we receive is checked, verified, and then entered into our database. So that's quite a complicated process. We don't just accept data blindly, we investigate it, look into it, make sure that it's accurate, and then we put it on the database. That relies on our small team, but more importantly, on a huge team of volunteer experts that are out there. So we're very lucky in Cumbria to have some amazing verifiers or county recorders who donate their time to particular taxon groups and really bring that local expertise. So they know where particular species are found in Cumbria, in particular valleys, in really specific locations, and they can apply that to the data that we receive. So without their help, we wouldn't be able to do the job that we do. We then, once it's been processed, we then extract that and make that data available in different formats to people who then need it. So that can be to local authorities to check planning applications. It can be consultants who are doing preliminary environmental assessments or EIAs. It can be absolutely anybody, anything that's working in their research, education, absolutely anything that needs biodiversity data. As I said, we're a small team, so this is just an insight to how small we are. So the core team are myself, Mustafa, who's our GIS and data manager, and Martin, who is our recording officer. So Martin kind of manages all the incoming data, Mustafa then processes it and manages all the outgoing data. We're also working on a project with Cumbria Wildlife Trust called the County Wildlife Site Project, which is evaluating local wildlife sites in Cumbria. And I don't say too much about that, but I'll say now that we have 1,600 such sites across Cumbria. About half of them had never been surveyed before our project started, even though they were designated 40, 50 years ago, and the other half were last looked at about 15 years ago. So it's a really important project to understand these locally important sites. So we have two really brilliant ecologists working on that, Beth and Lee. So as Tim said, our aim is to get all of Cumbria recording and contributing, because we want to kind of have this wonderful team of people around who are recording every bit of Cumbria. Every little inch of Cumbria can be covered, but also looking at different taxonomic groups as well. So we do, as I'll explain as we go along, we do better with some groups than others. So I'll also talk about some of the initiatives we've got running that people can get involved in, and potentially something as well for the Friends of the Ullswater Way. So what is wildlife recording? One of the questions we're often asked is it actually recording wildlife, whether that is videoing it or recording sound? And it's not. It is turning an observation into a log, into a data point. So it is logging what you see. That is simply what it is. It can relate to species, it can relate to habitats, and it can relate to sites. I will talk mostly about species recording now as well, because it's just easier for people to get involved in, and now there's so many tools available, you don't need a great deal of expertise to get started. I should say that we want to get as much data about wildlife as possible, but the only things we don't want to collect data on are livestock, pets, and other people. So other humans, we're not interested in those. But anything else is fair game. Sometimes it gets a bit blurry, and I'll have an example later on where it gets a little bit blurry over whether it's considered potentially livestock or not. But we can, again, if there are any questions over what is included and what isn't, we can answer that at the end. It's not just animals, it's all plants, fungi, even, algae, bacteria, if you wanted to go that far down, we would accept that as well. So why are we doing this? Why are we bothering to record the wildlife that we have around there? Well, the principal one is if we don't know what we have, we don't know what we can do to protect it, maintain it, whether what our actions are doing is actually reducing the biodiversity. We just need to have that baseline, that information, so that we can then take action. We also want to understand what the impacts of climate change might be. So as the temperature rises and we've got different weather patterns coming in, is that going to impact biodiversity? And it's certainly going to bring in more pests and diseases. So it's also understanding how that's happening in the health and well-being, particularly of plants, long-lived plants like trees, are going to be hugely affected. And we're already seeing that with ash dieback. So it's understanding how that is impacting and how species are moving as well through our landscape. We expect in Cumbria to have more species coming from the south, but also from the east. We also record the data because it helps inform planning decisions and development. Obviously, we don't want really rich areas to be paved over or removed. So we want to inform where is best to do these development projects. It's also a really good way of engaging with the environment. So you really focus, so it's really good for a health and well-being point of view. You can really focus in on a particular patch, a little patch of land, and focus in on it and look at what's detailed, and that is really good. It's almost like a meditation. You can really get a lot of information from that, but also just takes you out of yourself and you forget the world for a few minutes while you're doing some recording. So it's also good for our health and well-being. So there's lots of reasons, but the principal one is if we don't know what's out there, we can't take action and know that our actions are doing something good. One question that we often get is, well, what's the use of my one record? If I was to just submit one record a year, what use would that be? Well, then if you were to multiply it by everybody in Cumbria, plus all the visitors, that would be millions of records each year, which would contribute a little bit more information to that big picture. So it's almost like a massive jigsaw with tiny, tiny little pieces that we're building up. So each observation and each record that we get of that observation is really, really important. At the moment, we have, in our species database, we have 3.5 million species records. And I usually ask the room whether you think that's a lot or not. So I'm going to ask the room, and everybody online as well, so feel free to add it to your chat. Do you think having 3.5 million records of 40,000 plus different taxonomic groups across Cumbria is good or bad? Show of hands, good?
Yep.
Mediocre? Bad?
I would have said that you could do it. If you've got that many species, you need a lot more data.
We do. We do. So there are some urban areas in the UK which have 8 million, 12 million plus, and they're much smaller areas, and they're urban. And our urban areas can be incredibly biodiverse because of the actions that people do and the different planting and the different diversity of planting. But in a place such as Cumbria, which has this vast array of different habitats, we would expect to have more records. So our aim is to really boost that and get that to really reflect what's happening in Cumbria. We want to look at where data is sparse as well. So there are some areas where we've got really rich data and some that is really poor. So we do these lovely little heat maps, and you can see that the red little bits there, we've got lots of data points, lots of records, so that's reflecting recording effort. Well, I know this is Walney Island, so it does. We get low ones when we're out at sea, which is fine. But when we're a bit further inland, we still get low levels. So we want to identify those areas and maybe then focus in if we can, if it's publicly accessible or the landowner is happy for us to visit. And yeah, we need to do more recording generally. So I also wanted to talk about what do you need for a record, just to show how easy it is to generate species records. So we talk about the 4 W's, the what, the where, the when, and the who. I'll go through each of these. And I'll start by looking at this little bee that's suddenly flown into the room here in Watermillock Village Hall. And we can make this into an observation. Now this is when I was talking about, is it livestock, isn't it livestock? A honeybee, and this is a honeybee, if it's come from a farmed, if somebody is managing that bee colony, then you could argue it is livestock. But we don't know where this has come from, whether it's a wild bee or whether it's come, so we can still record it. So this is our little honeybee, our Apis mellifera. We record, so that is the key point. If we don't have the what, then we don't have a species record. So that is the key point to everything, is what has been seen. We need the where. I'll talk about that location information, but you can see that's on here. We've got the where, the when, and the who. And that is a species record. That's all we need. That's a basic species record. Often people provide other information. For instance, it might not just be one bee. It might be a swarm that's come through, and you want to record that it was a swarm. You don't need to record every single bee in that swarm. You can say that it's one sighting and it was a swarm in the comment section. There could be different things about life stages. That's often required for things like butterflies. So people might be recording butterflies or moths as caterpillars or adults, so it's always good to kind of capture that information. It can be eggs as well for birds or nest sites or things like that. Anything like that can help with the information, and there's usually a comment section that helps. But basically, we're looking at those 4 W's. And this is the key to it, I think, is the correct ID and the correct information. And I think this is what puts a lot of people off, is this first stage, because you don't feel, and I know I don't feel confident enough with a lot of different groups, and I work in the sector. So it's kind of building that confidence, starting with things that you recognise and build up. If you recognise a daisy in a lawn, record the daisy in a lawn, because it's the first step into recording. And then you can start investigating and learning other things. There are lots of support out there as well. So if you have a smartphone, I think most people now have a smartphone. I don't know what the percentage is now for the UK population, but it was pretty high. There are some really good free apps that are really easy to use and easy to download and really help with ID. So things like OBS Identify, Seek, I'm just trying to randomly think of things. Merlin, which is a brilliant one for doing sound, recording, detecting bird song from what's calling out. PlantNet is great as well for identifying plants. So there's lots of different apps out there that can help with that. The recording apps as well, so I'll introduce some recording apps later on, and they also have an ID mechanism. If you can take a photograph, they will help you with the ID. There are loads of online resources, there are books, there are the amazing Field Studies Council guides. I don't know whether anybody's seen them, but these laminated sheets that fold out, and they're relatively cheap to buy. They're about £3.50, £4. So they're all really good resources. So it's just a great way. And the kind of best thing to do is just get started, just get recording, and then you start investigating things as well. I included this leaf here because, you know, everybody should know an oak tree, right? But this one is slightly odd for the UK because it is not one of our 2 species or hybrids of the 2 species. So this is an American species, the red oak, Quercus rubra. So again, it's kind of, yeah, just being certain of your ID. So we could easily just record a Quercus, an oak species for that, but that is really useful to have all those wonderful ID supports that are out there. We ask for scientific names as well, so the binomial name that every species has. That is the definitive name. It's a universal language as well, so I have been talking to colleagues around the world, and we have different common names for things, but we can share the information through the scientific name. So I put on this slide, I don't know whether you can see that, but that's Hyacinthoides non-scripta, which is the bluebell, the English bluebell. But if I were to submit a record that just said bluebell, you'd want to know, is that the Spanish bluebell? Is that a bluebell in Scotland? Because sometimes in Scotland the bluebell is the harebell that we call in England. So again, common names can be deceptive. There are also regional and local names for things. I think birds are a really common one, where you have common names that include, for lapwing, it can be peewit and things like that. So it's dabchick as well for little grebe. So there can be differences in common names, but you have a definitive name when you have the scientific name. With AI, I mean, this is a benefit of AI. I know we're always knocking AI at the moment and how it's taking our jobs, and it's really going to take my job eventually. But AI is brilliant because you can type in a common name and it will tell you the scientific name. It's always best to double check, because sometimes it does suffer from hallucinations. So you do need to just double check, but at least it gives you that indication. So if you're in doubt, you can just type it into any AI tool and it will tell you. So there is a great reason to get into using, and scientific names are great as well, because they can tell you a little bit about the species. If it has Sylvatica or Sylvaticus as its specific name, so that second piece, it means of the woodland. And if you're studying a woodland and you've found something and it's, you know, you've looked it up and it says it's Sylvaticus, you think, oh, that's brilliant, I know that it's here. If it says palustris or something like that, you think, I might have ID'd this wrong, because that means of the meadow. It can also give you an indication of colour as well, size, how common something is. So things like vulgaris tend to be a little bit more common. So that is the what. It's kind of write down what you see. The where is the other slightly problematic one, because what we want is to be as specific as possible. So we are a local, I don't know whether anybody remembers the League of Gentlemen, but we're local data for local people. So we want to get as local and as specific as we can. When we're collecting for national schemes, it's not as important to be so specific. You can get away with quite a generic grid reference, maybe a 4-figure grid reference. Because we want to be really specific and because we want to map things so detailed, we ask for 6-figure plus. You know, the more detailed you can get, the better. So even a 10-figure grid reference is brilliant as far as we're concerned. That can be problematic if you see something flying over your head, but you're still there when you made that observation, so you can still do that record and it can still be detailed. And the more detailed it is, we can then widen it out and reduce that level of detail if needed, so we can reduce it down. So we want really detailed information. We generally ask for place names and grid references rather than place names or grid references. So we want the grid reference is the key bit, because that is our spatial tool that we can put into our GIS system, and it will locate us, geolocate us to a specific point in Cumbria. Having the place name is really useful because sometimes those numbers in the grid references can reverse themselves in a very annoying way. Usually if you copy and paste them, they're okay, but if you're typing it in from another one, it's easy to misidentify a 1 and a 7 or an 8 and a 6 or something like that. So the place name just helps to check that we've got the correct grid reference. We often deal with really old data where there are no grid references, no location, and just this very vague description of where this species was found. And that's really infuriating because we can't use it. We just don't have the detailed information to use it. So making sure that we have specific information is really, really important. And there's lots of helpers out there as well. So there's this great tool, a great website called UK Grid Reference Finder, and you can go in, you can put in where you are, postcode, street name, village name, whatever, and it will give you all this wonderful detailed information. Hopefully you can see it. A lovely 10-figure grid reference. It gives you a 6-figure one as well if you want to be a little bit more woolly. It gives you the easting, northing, latitude, longitude. It helpfully also gives you the what 3 words. So I don't know whether anybody's used what 3 words, but that's a really versatile tool to use. So with this data, we can go down to, just a couple of meters square. The what 3 words goes to about a 3 meter by 3 meter area. So we can get some really specific information that goes down. And what 3 words is brilliant as well because it's all translatable. So if you prefer words to numbers, you can use this system as well. We're quite happy to say that. So really good websites out there to help with the location. You do need to know roughly where you were when you made that, so you can find it on the map, but that's where phones can come in and where recording using phones can be really helpful, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a while. When is really easy, because all we need is the day of the week. We don't need the time. We don't need any details like the weather. It's all useful information. If you see a nocturnal species during daylight hours and you record that, then that might flag some issues with the county recorder. But there can be mitigating reasons for that. Because if you see a barn owl hunting in daylight following weeks and weeks of rain, then that's absolutely fine. Because that's what they will do when they're hungry. So the when is just simply the date, and the who is the recorder, so yourself making the record. Why do we need this? Well, there are two reasons. One, when we send the data to the county recorders, if they have any issues with it or they want further information, they know then they can come back to us and say, can we contact this person? And we will contact them. So if you submit a record, you say there's a photograph, but you haven't submitted the photograph, we can then contact you and say, can we see this photograph? Can we see the recording you made? Is it still there? Can we come and see it if it's really, really special? So that's partly. The other point to note is that you made that record, it's your data. So we want to put your name on that because you are the data owner. If you've then submitted it to CBDC, you're loaning it, or letting us use it. So thank you if you do that already. So that's all it is. I know it sounds a bit more complicated the way I've kind of gone into depth about common names and locations, but that's basically all it is. It's a what, where, when, and who. And ultimately, you build up this wonderful list of things that you can see, and that becomes a data set. And we have 3.5 million of those, and we want more. There's lots of ways that you can record and lots of tools. So I have always, since I've been very young, had a fridge list. So that's just the list that I write almost every morning, put it on my fridge with a magnet, and I can look at that. And then since I've been with CBDC, I've got used to transcribing that as well. But a fridge list, if that's useful to you, it's really good. You can see then, if you maintain that every year, you can see when things appear each year. So the first time you see frog spawn, the first time the swifts come back, all those kind of bits you can look at personally. If you then digitize it, you can send it to us and we can use it. So we have an online submission form, which is great for just the occasional observation, or you can download this spreadsheet from our website if you want to maintain something rolling, if you want to do a digital fridge list. There are other spreadsheets, you can create your own, but some of the easiest ways to do recording is using apps. So has anybody used iNaturalist or iRecord? So I can see nodding, which is great. It'd be great if anybody online as well wants to say whether you use iNaturalist or iRecord. So they're the two we generally recommend. They both do the same thing. So my suggestion is always, for the first time, download them both, have a play around with both, and then keep the one that you really like and makes sense to you and get rid of the other one. So iNaturalist is an app that was developed in the US. I think it was Cornell University who developed the Merlin app. It's really, really easy to use. It's great if you're a beginner, you're uncertain about whether this is something that you want to do. So it's really great at that, and it's good because if you take a lot of pictures, it has an AI algorithm built into it, and that's getting better at photo recognition as well. So it can help with your ID. If you get everything set up, it sorts, and you have your location switched on, and you create an account with them, it will automatically do the where, when, and who for you without you having to bat an eyelid, because it's picking that up from your phone's location when you've made your photograph, and it will help you identify. So it's a really good thing. You can do hundreds and hundreds of records a day, theoretically, if you're just going around snapping and doing that. So great to get started. iRecord is very similar. It's a UK app developed by the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. It's very focused on UK wildlife. So it's and it often requires a little bit more information than iNaturalist, so sometimes you need to have to fill in a few more boxes. But it has the added strength is that a lot of our verifiers, a lot of our county verifiers are verifying the iRecord. So they are picking up your records almost straight away, and they'll be verifying and checking them. And that's really good from an ID help point of view, because it does have the little AI picture photo recognition aspect to it, so it can help with that, but it also has a person at the other end who is saying, oh yes, that's really accurate. So they're really good. iNaturalist feeds into iRecord, so you don't need to do them both. So just choose whichever one makes sense to you and whichever is comfortable for you. They both do everything as well. So they are not taxon specific. They do absolutely everything. If you're really focused on a taxonomic group, then there are some specific apps that are out there that are worth a look at. So Bird Track and eBird, very focused on birds. They do other things as well, but they are really set up for birds and collecting bird data. So if that's your thing, then they may be better than the general apps. eSurveyor is really good for grassland plants. So if you're a farmer or a landowner and you're maintaining grassland, then that is a really good one to have. It does habitat surveys as well as just species ID. And then we've got some national schemes as well. So iRecord butterflies and iMammalia are both really specific to butterfly transects for butterfly conservation, and for the Mammal Society they have one. They're kind of on the iRecord format, but they have their own additional data requirements. So that's a kind of summary of everything I've just mentioned in one slide, hopefully. So that is kind of what you can do. You can record everything, create a record, and then hopefully send it to an organisation who can use it. If you're using iNaturalist or iRecord, they automatically come through to us, and they'll go to other organisations as well. So they'll go to national schemes. Hedgehog recording, for instance, will pick up some of those. Some of the bird big surveys, they will pick it up as well. So you can, just by using a simple app, make it available to be used really quite widely, both locally, nationally, and potentially internationally as well. And you have contributed something amazing. So doing something for nature need not simply be, it takes a lot of effort. Planting trees, doing hedging, all that strenuous activity. You could be sat there with a cup of tea, looking out your window, doing something for nature by simply observing what's coming to your bird table. So a really simple and effective way to do something really quickly every single day of the year. So once we get all that data, we pop it into our database. We send it to our verifiers who look through everything and say whether they think it's correct or not, or needs some more information, whether we need to go back to the recorders, all that kind of information. And eventually we can then confirm it, put it in, and start to investigate what it says. So a few days ago, I thought I'm going to investigate what it says about Ullswater. So what do our records show? And there were lots of interesting things that the species showed, but I thought I'd also talk about sites as well here. So let's look at statutory sites. So I haven't mentioned sites so much. I mentioned county wildlife sites, and we'll come back to that in the next slide. There are lots of important sites across the UK, and a lot of those are designated statutory sites. So these are ones that have the maximum level of protection because they're seen as being nationally important for wildlife, for conservation, for biodiversity. So I'm talking SSSI, so sites of special scientific interest, national nature reserves, sites of conservation interest. All these kind of things are really important. So I put a few into, this is Magic Maps, which is a freely available mapping tool from DEFRA. So you can search online, you can go everywhere, and it's all the kind of government's open access information. So all the statutory sites are on there, and you can have a look and see. And you can see that the body of Ullswater, I pressed the wrong button, is completely covered by SSSI, as is some of the banks and some of the areas just around the edging. So that's nice to know that it's got that top level of protection. Then we go to the local sites. So these are more the non-statutory sites. So they're designated, but they're non-statutory. That means that they have the lowest level of protection. They're only really protected under planning law. So theoretically, you can't build on them, but you can do anything else, really. So they're the ones I spoke about before, about the County Wildlife Site project. They are the ones that are locally important, but not necessarily there's something missing that doesn't make them nationally important. You tend to find these, and you can see here that they act as buffers around the statutory sites, the SSSIs, the sites of conservation interest, the national nature reserves, Ramsars, whatever. They act as buffers, but they can also link up sites. So again, so you can see the body of water here, that's Ullswater, and you can see that we've got the brown ones are the county wildlife sites. So they include Burt Crag Wood, Scale Howe Wood, Glencoyne Park, and Area Force. Area Force also happens to be in green as well as brown, and that's a local geological site. Again, another non-statutory designated category. So a site can be two. We've also got this hatched black site as well, and they are sites of invertebrate significance. So there can be, because there are some rare invertebrates and insects and things that are lurking around there. So that's important as well to note, that the Ullswater Way kind of cuts through both statutory and non-statutory sites. So that's really nice to know that there are nationally and locally important sites here. So I also thought, well, let's look at the species. So our next bit was to download the species list for the area, and there was over 100,000 species listed in the Ullswater area from just under, I think we're about 4,975 different taxonomic groups. I then split those taxonomic groups up to just see what had been recorded most where. So birds always top the list because there are so many people recording birds. When you think about, when I said the cup of tea out of the window, it is the birds that you're noting. You might also be noting what birds are sat on. They might be sat on a tree, so we've got the flowering plants as well. Moths are also a really big group that are commonly recorded across Cumbria and elsewhere. So they're the biggest insect group by far. Here, I think, was it about 8,000 records of moths? But if you take insects as a whole, so we've got beetles down here, we've got flies, butterflies as well. There are just under 20,000 insect records for Ullswater as well. And mammals are really well represented, which isn't always the case. Half of those records, so half of those 4,000 records, are for squirrels. So I think that is brilliant. 6,000 records, so it's 3,000 for squirrels, which I think is really, well, that...
Red and how many grey?
There you go. So red squirrels top the list. So 2,000 records for red squirrels, 1,000 for grey. And I should say as well that the earliest record for both red and grey was 1955. No one seems to have recorded them prior to 1955, at least in this area. Elsewhere in Cumbria maybe, but in the Ullswater Valley area, just just since 1955. Remarkably, they were both recorded at the same time, so I wonder whether that might have been something. They saw a red and a grey at the same time, and they recorded it. It was at Lowther as well, if you're interested. April 1955, red and grey squirrel recorded. There was then a bit of a break for greys until the 1990s, so no further records for greys until the 1990s, and then loads of records, obviously we've got 1,000, up until 2015, and then it's gone quiet again. Really odd. Reds have been pretty consistent from, again, there was that 1955 record, then it went a bit quiet, and then from the 1970s right up until 2025, we've got red squirrel records. So I don't quite know what's happened to the greys. Have we got rid of the greys?
Back a second. You said 5,000 unique species.
Yes.
What does that mean?
One of those is red squirrel, another one is grey squirrel, so it's a specific species. So,
Because all species are unique.
yes, they are. So each species there's 5,000 different ones rather than, so 5,000 unique taxonomic categories in there. So we might have one record for one particular species that's just been recorded once in Ullswater, but we could have, like we had with the red squirrel, 2,000.
But you don't mean in terms of unique in the UK, you only find them in Cumbria?
No, I just mean they're different, yeah, they're not the same. Then we have birds, as you'd expect. We've got 38,000 bird species, 38,000 records for birds. The most commonly recorded are the chaffinch and the blackbird. I was quite surprised with the chaffinch, actually. So chaffinch tops the list, 1,490 records. Blackbird, 1,383. It's usually the robin. So it's quite it's slightly different in I wonder whether that's to do with the woodland. Because there's quite a lot of woodland, isn't there, along the edge of the woods. But anyway, both kind of woodlandy type species. So quite interesting to have that. It does show the importance as well of recording common species. One of our aims is that our data set is going to be useful, hopefully, in another 100 years' time. And I'll show you some of the old stuff in the next slide, just showing you how useful having older data can be, because then you can see what the changes are. If we were to look at what's happening now, over the last 50 years, we'd think that the Ullswater Valley is overrun with red squirrels. We know that's not the case, but it's not reflected, it's not providing that balance with all the other species that are present. So it's trying to get that balance. We want to have the rare species, we want to have the unusual, but we also want to know about the common ones so that this data set is useful in 100 years' time when somebody wants to get an accurate baseline for the Ullswater Valley. So the importance of having those common species is important. It's also really good to see fluctuations of population. You often use house sparrows as an example. House sparrows were just once so common. And now it's quite unusual to see a little population of them chattering away in a hedgerow or just outside a house and nesting in the houses. It's really unusual. So common species can become rare, rare can become common. And there's also some species that may become invasive as well as climate changes. So we may see more plants jump, and we are seeing more plants jump over the garden wall and go out and explore the wider countryside. We want to try and monitor that as we go along. So it's looking at invasive non-native species as well. So I had a great deal of fun looking through the age of the records. So our first record in our database was from 1512, and that was for fallow deer in what was the Inglewood Forest. That has been immortalised in a new exhibit at Tully. If you've been to Tully, there is a big fallow deer in the kind of reception area because that is our first record. It's interesting to note that for this area, or kind of just north of this area, so it's Greystoke, so it's just outside, there's fallow deer recorded in 1640. So just 130 odd years after our first record, we're still getting fallow deer cropping up in the old deer parks. Interestingly as well, there's the Martindale red deer, who are quite famous, I think. So it's good to know that we have a record of red deer from 1661, and then quite frequently thereafter as well. So yeah, red deer have been here and consistently recorded through the years. I like the wildcat records, so this is quite timely because we were approached not long ago for information about wildcats because of potential reintroduction programs, not in Cumbria, but potential reintroduction programs, and wanting to get an idea of where things are, where they were last recorded. There was a real spate of wildcat records between 1706 and 1759. I mean, lots of records. And in fact, in one year, in 1726, they recorded 5 individuals at one observation. So it's one observation, somebody saw 5 of them, recorded them. Might have been a mother with a young, we've lost that detail, but still, it's amazing to see those wild cat records. Something happened after 1759, they just stop. No more wildcat records for Martindale. So presumably they'd been hunted, killed, or moved on. We all know about the golden eagle just a bit further south at Ullswater, but there is a record as well at Martindale from 1778. So again, it's quite nice to see that there's one obviously flying over Ullswater. And some of, Atlantic salmon are fairly consistently recorded throughout, but the first record was 1787. So there you go. I just thought that was really interesting that there are records going back to 1640, 1661, the 18th century for the wildcat. So this is just the number of records that are received. So those early examples, they're just 1 or 2 records coming in, probably spaced over, 1 a year and then nothing for 20 years, and then you get another one. You can see that when CBDC formed, so this is a year, so it shouldn't have that little annoying comma in there, but I didn't have time to take it out. So when CBDC was formed in 2011, you can see we've suddenly got this lovely spike of records going up. I should point out that this one is a bit of an anomaly. We had a large data set of plant records that were kind of given to us, and they represented a time interval, I think 1974 to 1999 or something. So, but for some reason the computer system has just plucked them as 1974. There was no further dates assigned to them, so it's given that bit of an anomalous spike. But because they're plants, it's generally an indication that they may still be here, but we do need to update our plant records for Ullswater. So I also wanted to flag some really interesting stories that came out as well from the data. So I looked through, there are 5,000 different species, so I wasn't going to pull all of those out, so I've just gone with a few. So we've looked at wildcat and things like that. But pine marten I thought was a really interesting one. It was regularly recorded in the 19th century. It became a little less common into the 20th century, and then it's kind of suddenly reappeared in 2023 after a very, very long interval. So don't know what that means at the moment, but that's just an occasion, one data point. So we'll see whether we get more pine marten observations coming through. Another one was white-clawed crayfish. So looking more recently, so we don't have to go back to the 19th century, we can go back to the 1980s. Really strong, loads of records coming in for Ullswater and the surrounding tributaries. Saw lots of records up until 2002, and then something happened. There were lots of suddenly dead specimens, and then it's kind of tailed off completely. So again, that's telling a different story. One of our roles, I should say, is not necessarily to interpret the data. We just generally provide the data to others to interpret. So yeah, you can interpret that in any way you want. Salmon, I mentioned before, so we had that first record in 1787. Loads and loads of records initially, and then nothing for a very long time until the 1990s. And then suddenly it's really regularly recorded until 2019. So again, what happened to suddenly, after a long gap of 100 and so years, suddenly it started recording? Is that recording effort and people just suddenly really interested in salmon and recording it, or was there something actually happening to the population? So that's another story behind some of these records. Is it recording effort? Somebody's really interested in a particular species or taxonomic group and they're really making an effort to go out there and record it, or is it reflecting some changes in the wider environment? So looking at that, there are some really good recording hotspots around Ullswater. So there's lots of data on this from these areas, and these are our, when I looked at that before and I had that heat map and the red areas and the yellow areas. So these are our red areas, these are our yellow areas. So there's huge potential here to really boost recording if people want to go up the steeper slopes and the more inaccessible areas, obviously with permission of the landowner. I also wanted to mention the Cumbria Local Nature Recovery Strategy, which was published last November, and that is a really good resource as well for anybody who's interested in habitat creation, restoration, enhancement, because it provides some indication of where habitats might be created. It's not a plan, it is just a strategy that's using best available data to model where particular habitat types could go. So the colour scheme is probably not the best here, but you can see that there are 3 really key habitat groups in this area. The woodland area here, so you can see there's lots of enhance and restore and create of woodland patches along the banks of the lake. We've got lots of montane, moorland areas as well, so a lot of restore and enhance up here, and there's occasional little bits of grassland where you're doing enhance and restore work. So it's kind of well covered though with particular suggestions. There is obviously areas where there is very little data, it couldn't be modelled, but where there has been decent data, we've been able to, the LNRS team have been able to create some suggested habitat types that could be created, restored or enhanced in those areas. So that is, again, freely available. If you search for Cumbria LNRS and the interactive map, you can go and explore your local area. It's very much at a landscape scale, so when you zoom in too far, if you were zooming in to look at a particular landholding or farm or even garden, it'll vanish because it's not designed for that. It is a landscape scale project. So here at Watermillock, we can see that we're kind of right in the middle of a create area. So this yellowy area here that goes all along, that's a create area for woodland. So that's what's suggested for outside and about here. So that was a quick glimpse at some of the interesting things. And I mean, that was a really quick glimpse through the 100,000 records that we've got for Ullswater and pulling out a few kind of noticeable stories. There's probably a load more that's buried in there, especially, I know I pulled out kind of the big things like the mammals and the birds. There's probably some really exciting stuff going on there with moths and beetles and things like that, which would make for a really good research project if someone was interested in doing that. How to get into recording as well and what people can do to do more. Well, if you want to do that, it's kind of create a recording event in Ullswater, get people interested, come along to a recording session. I don't like the term BioBlitz, but it's a commonly used term. Have a BioBlitz somewhere that encourages people to come along and record everything you can see and hopefully generates some of those records that can be followed up. Joining local groups or societies. Cumbria is great for having so many different natural history societies and some really good taxonomic groups. If you're interested in birds, there's a bird group. Invertebrates, there's an invertebrate group. General ones as well. So again, it's take part in some of their sessions. Take part in a local or national recording scheme. So big garden bird watch, big butterfly count, all of those really great things that you can do over a weekend. Maybe we could set up a recording project for this area as well along the Ullswater Way. So we've set up quite a few on iNaturalist and iRecord, so it can kind of picks up those ad hoc records that people make as they're going along, and a lot of people do, visitors and locals alike and residents. We've also launched some things as well. So we have the national schemes that happen beyond us, but we've also launched Challenge 365, which is a challenge for anybody. It's a bit late now, but at the start of the new year, you kind of set yourself up to do 1 record a day for the full year. And can you get 365 or 366 in a leap year records? I keep failing, I have to admit. I'll admit to it on camera and on recording. There are days that I miss out. So it is challenging, but there are then some people who are massively over-recording beyond 1 species a day. We also have started Cumbria Wild Watch, which is always going to be the last weekend in June, and that is a bit like the Big Garden Bird Watch, but applied to Cumbria and kind of all wildlife. So we want to get more people involved in that, and more events and more things focused around that as well. And that is really to get more people recording, even if it is just for that 1 weekend. We'll get that wonderful data set which we can then compare and contrast. We've just run it for 2 years, and we're already seeing differences, mainly because of the weather across those 2 recording weekends, but that has been fantastic to see that we're already getting some really interesting results from a relatively new project. So just some dates for the diary. If you're in Cumbria between the 25th and the 28th of June, you can go out and do a spotted recording. Can be absolutely anywhere, even your back garden, and just for 10 minutes. Again, with a cup of tea. You've got to do everything with a cup of tea. And that's it. That is kind of a quick run through of recording in Cumbria and how to do it, how to get involved, and what's happening here in Ullswater. Thank you.
I'm assuming the onliners are clapping as well.
So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Rebecca. That was a fantastic thing, and one of the few talks which actually really has focused in on Ullswater. Often we try to encourage speakers to focus on Ullswater and they drift off somewhere else. But you really invested time and energy in digging up records for here, which is wonderful.
Oh, it was fun to do. It really was. And I was just, the wildcat I didn't expect. I hadn't investigated the data set, so it was quite interesting to find that.
Questions from our audience here and also online? I don't know, Joe, whether you can see.
We had one question earlier from Basak asking, is the recording being done by cameras, drones or other sources without the human eye?
We do have recording taking place from satellite imagery for habitats, principally drones. Again, it's habitat or deer surveys, so there is information happening that way. It's taking off a bit. That's a terrible pun. I do apologise. It wasn't meant to be, but it is increasing. Yeah. And I think we'll probably see a lot more drone imagery as well. So we're also hoping to do some research in that area and see if we can get some more underwater as well, because that's going to be fantastic to be able to go into the lakes and investigate what's happening there with some underwater drones. I mean, there's always issues with turbidity and things like that, but hopefully we can do a bit more along those. Things like, I know this is going off topic, it's not kind of drones or satellites or anything like that, but eDNA is another one, so environmental DNA. So you can take a sample and then analyse it for trace levels of DNA. That's really interesting. Still lots of quality issues, but it can give you an indication of what might be there. So that's really fascinating as well.
Questions from the floor here? I've got hundreds of questions, but then I was going to go first. One immediate one is that we're engaged in doing a freshwater ecology survey on Ullswater, which we started up in October last year. And we have 10 volunteer groups. It's a sort of citizen science project. Mm-hmm. And all the data is being sent to the Freshwater Biological Association. Is all that data automatically going
It's
your database?
not automatically going in yet, but we are talking to the FBA about how to get better data flows, and that's always the problem. It's kind of, when there are projects happening, everyone's gathering that data, and then it's often that little end piece of then sharing it widely gets forgotten because you move on to the next project. So we're actively, that's kind of what our role is really, is chasing this data and capturing it. So carry on doing what you're doing, and we'll be in the background trying to get access to
The
it.
answer is no. At the moment, that data is...
At the moment, we're a bit behind with it, but we will have data sharing agreements and things in place. So that's why, in some instances, some of our taxonomic groups they're not as well represented as you think they should be because of the data flow issue, but it will be resolved. And it doesn't matter, we often get data sets that might be 50, 60 years old. They'll come in and they're still relevant and they still show us interesting things. It doesn't necessarily have to be this very minute we get it. It's always more useful to have that, but as long as it comes in eventually, we're happy.
Another question that I have relates to work that we started on the habitat campaign here. Mm-hmm. After there was a talk here by Professor Lewis Mansfield from the University of Cumbria, who sort of threw down a gauntlet and said, is anyone doing proper recording of biodiversity in Ullswater? Because stats are given out and they are dubious, to say the least. We have to start with a proper record, and that stimulated us to try, at least in one area, in Matterdale, start that process. But we came to see your office, and I remember I certainly was struck by the fact that there was a time when there were government biodiversity surveys, and what we were interested to find out was the difference between surveys in 1950 and current surveys that we were doing. And that data is there, but I don't think it's, as far as I'm aware,
it's not been fully
really
digitised.
Dug into, and that was because no money, no people, the usual story.
Yeah.
So she was saying, Professor Mansfield, that although there's a lot of data from the past when these things are better resourced, it's not the case now. So it's very difficult to get a good idea of whether biodiversity in Cumbria in general, but maybe in our particular area in Ullswater, is going up or down or flat or whatever. So I don't know how much money it costs to pay someone to, or whether they're volunteers willing to just dig into that database and try to produce a report on changes over the course of time.
Well, there are two separate things there. So the species data and the habitat are completely different. There's never really been a focus on recording species except for research projects or various different schemes that might have emerged around a particular group of species. Red squirrels being a key one because lots of groups have come up. So that looking at biodiversity change over time can be difficult because there's no consistent work, which is what we're trying to do, is rectify and pull all these data sets together so we can try and set that baseline. The other one is habitats, and habitats are really, really important. Having a good habitat map for Cumbria is key because that defines then what species are likely to occur in that particular habitat and where you can look at it. So looking at temperate Atlantic rainforest, for instance, where are the key areas for that? How is it doing? How is it faring? And then investigating kind of particular species makeup. So there are two kind of separate issues. The habitat one is the challenging one because you have to have a good deal of, as you know, if you've been doing it, botanical knowledge, but you've also got to have an understanding of the habitats classification and kind of vegetation communities, national vegetation classification, things like that. They're all quite significant. You're quite right that there hasn't been a proper habitat survey of the UK since the 1980s. There's certain regions have tried. But there was a big government survey in the 1980s, and we're still trying to digitise that data set. We've got it as a raster format. We're trying to turn it into a vector, which can then be a lot more useful. It's not just a picture format. It's actually something you can interact with. And we're slowly doing that for bits of Cumbria, and that will provide our baseline. So we'll have this 1980s baseline, and then we can superimpose new surveys. So the survey that you're doing, we could superimpose over that and see what changes have happened in the last 45 years. The great thing about the LNRS is that it's used a lot of that data. It's used a lot of existing and extant data sets. It's used data that's come from other people that have had their habitat surveys, and we've been able to model it as well and try and fill in those gaps. So underlying this is kind of what we want the habitat, but underneath there is kind of what we think the existing habitat is at the moment. So that has proved to be a useful exercise for Cumbria, because it's the first time that we I use the royal we, it's not me, other experts and the LNRS team have pooled all this information together to create this wonderful map and strategy that's based on a lot of model data and some existing data. There are still huge gaps though, and we still need to get that. So that is one of our aspirations as well, is to try and define every parcel of land in Cumbria, is to give it a habitat survey it for its habitat. I mean, each land parcel might have several different habitats going on in it. It might not just be one, but we still want to do that. That would be a huge cost, but we're starting with the county wildlife sites. So if we can get those 1,600 sites surveyed, and then we can start radiating out and maybe get other groups set up that can go out and do surveys as well. There's been a lot of confusion when it comes to habitats as well, of what classification system you use. So phase 1, NVC, UK HAB. UK HAB is becoming the main one. So yeah, that has also caused some fluctuations because it's quite old data. You're then having to convert it into UK HAB. There are conversion tables and there are ways of doing it, so it's not impossible, but it just takes that extra time as well. So if you were doing a UK HAB survey now and you've got the phase 1 survey from the 1980s, you have to translate the phase 1 into UK HAB and then do a comparison with the note that it might not be a perfect translation. So yeah, lots of provisos there, but it is something we want to do better. And if we can do that using lots of willing volunteers, brilliant. Because I think that's the only way it's going to get done, to be honest. I don't think there's ever going to be funding to do that again.
Any questions again online or from the floor?
So can I just ask, when you look up on the Magic Map and you're looking at all of the habitat layers, where has that information come from?
So that is, Natural England do a lot of surveys. They'll go out and they will do surveys across it can be quite old and it can take a while to process that information. So, and sometimes they will focus on a particular habitat type. So you might find really detailed information about a particular habitat. Might be raised blanket bog, for instance. There might be really good information and there might be absolutely nothing about wax-capped grasslands, for instance. So yeah, it's a bit patchy, but they do try to get out there and do surveys. And that is actually what underlies this, is the work that has gone into.
I mean, the reason I'm asking is because if you look at like around Latterdale, you look at and think, well, where nobody's surveyed it. A
lot of it is satellite imagery as well, and a lot of it is satellite imagery, and that has, I mean, it's a good way of using kind of reduced manpower to look at large areas. You do need to then go and ground truth it, and they do that, but whether they do it, because it's a national scheme, whether they do that quite so much as it would be if it was a kind of a local one where you'd want to do a bit more detail, then that's another question. And satellite imagery is getting better, and the tools that are used to interpret it are getting better, but there are still going to be issues with things like tree canopies, and especially if it's in the summer, it's kind of understanding what's happening beneath, things like that. So yeah, there are issues, but it is a good tool to have in the armoury.
It's a broad tool.
Yeah. But we can do things better. We can do things better, but it always requires, it's that kind of resource thing, money and people.
Maybe one last question, but not directed to you, I mean to our supporters, and that is you sort of threw down a gauntlet that would you like to do something on Cumbria Wild Watch? What did you call it?
Well, Cumbria Wild Watch at the end of June.
I don't know, to other people listening online and so on, are we interested in having a go this year?
Definitely, I think that's an excellent idea. I'm also interested in doing an eye record on the Ullswater Way, and that might be something we could tie in with our 10th anniversary. encourage people as they're doing the way, it's actually the way to.
Do we have hands up from our Zoomers? Are we interested in trying to make a contribution to iRecord on the Cumbria Wildlife? And if so, we can sort of pursue negotiations with the centre to see whether we can, how we should make sure it works.
We've got a few nodding head and a few yeses, so...
Nodding heads and yeses, well, that's what we like to do.
That's positive.
Okay. So I do have a question for you, and that's the final one. Normally we raise money from our talks. Have you thought which charity you would like donations to go to if people wish to make any donation?
I was thinking of trying a local-ish group, and they're doing some great work, and they're relatively recent. So the Penrith Swift group, I wondered whether, because I think what they do is quite good. I don't know whether you've donated to them in the past or...
Penrith Swift group, no, that would be a first. We haven't even contacted them, I don't think.
Okay.
So yes, that.
Yeah.
Okay, duly recorded. Well, I've got two brief things. One is to say that our next talk is going to be given by Dr. Keith Mitchell, and it's called Into the Water Barrier, and it's about Donald Campbell and Bluebird K7 on Ullswater. Keith Mitchell is a specialist who's been looking at bluebird for 25 years and has contributed to books on bluebird, and he's going to talk on that topic at 7:30 p.m. on Thursday the 5th of March in Watermillock Village Hall. And the last thing to say is really a word of thanks to you for coming here. It's very cold in this hall. I don't know why we've been gradually shivering. And for you it must have been difficult as well. But thank you so much for introducing your work. We wish it well, obviously, and we think we can probably contribute more than we are at the moment to your work. So we've already had contact with you before for habitat training and other aspects. So maybe after this talk today, some ideas might emerge from conversations to see how we can contribute even further. So thank you very much indeed for all your work and your effort, and I wish you the best of luck. Thank you so much.
Thank you.